Let me hit record and let's do it. So can you guys see my screen, see my terminal? And okay, cool. All right, so I'm gonna make a dir. So remember that Rails is really friendly and goes ahead and creates the directory for us, but in the Node JavaScript world, we have to create our own folders. So we'll make dir, I'm gonna cd into that. I'm gonna do npm init -y, because I'm lazy. And then to start off, I'll touch a server.js file, and then let me open this up in Atom. And this code should look familiar. This is what we use for most of our lessons and exercises, how to just like quickly spin up a Node server with Express. So let me copy from number 3 there. I'm just gonna copy that code and slap it in here. This code is directly from those lesson links that I sent you guys that we've already gone through for reference. Then I'll need to npm install Express. No Mongoose this time, which is awesome. And then let's make dir public. And I'm going to create a JavaScript folder, which is where our Angular app is going to live. And let's create an app.js, which will be how we instantiate our Angular app. Cool. And so there's our app.js right there. I'll split my screen. And then inside here, let's just instantiate our new Angular app. So it'll be angular.module. Hopefully this is our review. Muse app, and then our square brackets. So that's steps 1 through 7. Nothing new, nothing too crazy. Step 8, let's create a Muse controller file. So we'll touch .js, Muse controller.js. And then in this file, I'm just going to put some basic code to get us started. And I really hate copying code, but I want to get you guys back into the breakout. So I'm going to copy the code from the lesson. And this is all the code there in that number 8 screenshot. But this is how we instantiate a controller. This shouldn't be anything new. I'm just going to create a new controller called Muse controller. Here's my function declaration down here. I'm passing in $HTTP because the whole point of this exercise is to practice hitting our Rails API, which I have spinning. It's my Rails server is still running in my other window. So inside here, doing var self equals this, and I'm going to instantiate just an empty artists array. And that's what I'm going to be pushing to my Angular view here shortly. And just to start, I'm going to create this getArtist function. It's going to do a $HTTP get request to the same path that we've been playing around with in Postman and stuff all morning. So know that that works. And then to start, I'm just going to console log the response.data object just to make sure that it's working. Before I even start building a view or ng repeat, I'm going to try to do like the minimum amount possible just to test this out. So I just want to console log all of my artists from my database. And then whenever I load this controller, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of initialize, kind of go ahead and call this getArtists. So every time I go to /artists in my app, it's just going to go ahead and make that HTTP call. every time I load it up. And then I'm attaching self.artist, that property, to my getArtist function there, or getArtist method to my getArtist function. So that is my basic controller to get us started. And then let me touch an index.html. And I'll grab a CDN version of Angular and also UI router, because we're going to put UI router just like 2 or 3 states. You're going to try to keep it as minimal as possible. And let me touch that file. So I'm going to touch in my public folder index.html. And then again, in the interest of time, I'm going to dump all this lovely, lovely HTML code inside here. And let me quickly walk through what we're doing. So I asked you guys to call this app Muse app. So I'm doing my ng app directive on the HTML opening tag. I'm pulling in Angular. Here's my UI router. I went ahead and connected with the script tags, the source file for my app.js and Muse controller. I also put some lovely, lovely styling. So I'm going to leave styling to you guys, but some of these images that I'm grabbing from like Google Images, they're all different sizes. So in the screenshot, just to keep those little kind of images consistent, I'm just making them all 100 by 100, just so there's some consistency there. The body is pretty basic. I'm calling ng controller on the body. And then I started a very, very simple nav using UI router with my UI srefs. I'm just going to build, for today's purposes, you guys can add more if you want, but I'm just going to create an artist link and a new artist form link. So that's what we're going to try to get through today. So that's in the nav. You guys will probably want to make that a little better looking. And then my UI view right here, which is where we'll insert the templates from the UI router when we go to these routes. So that's my index. Just a few more steps here and we'll be ready to go. So let me create a partial for the first state of artists, which is going to get all the artists from my Rails API and put them into a partial. So let me create a partials folder. So make dir public partials. And then inside here, let's go ahead and create an artists.html. And inside there, man, I'm really doing a lot of this. I didn't intend to give you guys all of this starter code, but anywho. So inside of the partials, the artist.html, I'm just doing this in a table format. You guys can do what you want with it, but just kind of the path of least resistance. I'm creating a table and I'm ng repeating over all of my artists. Oh my God, I'm giving you guys all of this stuff. This is awful. Oh gosh. Yeah, so this is my artist.html partial. And then the final thing I want to do is set up my state, my UI router. And so that's going to be step 4 here. Excuse me, step 12. So I'm going to put this, instead of creating a separate like config folder and a separate router folder, just for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to chain this router onto my app.js, where I initially instantiate my Angular app. So I'm going to do a .config and just chain it on down here. So I'll create a Muse router. And we need to make sure to inject UI router for sure. And then down here, We'll do muse router $inject. And we're going to pass in a few things. I'll just grab this from the screenshot in the interest of time. So router $inject. Does someone mind coming on mic and refreshing us? What does that $inject method do for us? Why do we want to use that?
In case we forget to add it.
In case we forget to add it?
Well, in case we forget, it's kind of like a fail safe. So in case, if I remember it correctly, the idea is in case we forget to later on add like state provider URL or one of those things that are necessity, it injects those for us.
Not really. Alan's kind of got the right idea in Slack. So that $inject just helps with minification. So remember when we minify our files, when we push them to production, that process of minification strips out white space. It also like substitutes some of the variable namings and stuff. So that $inject is just kind of a preventative way to make sure that all of our variable names, the really important variable names, maintain their integrity. So instead of, if I have a var artists, there's a chance in minification that it may change it to like var A or var B, like something more general and more concise. And sometimes minification can kind of screw up our app in that way. Anyway, so $inject maintains the integrity of our code in minification. And to Audrey's point, I mean, I guess it could be kind of a reminder. But technically, this app would work without $inject, at least locally. But it's just a good idea, kind of as a fail-safe, to put it in there if we're going to push to production. So for consistency's sake, that's why we're doing that. Then we have our muse router function, and we're injecting state provider, URL router provider, location provider. These are the same ones that Colin walked through in the UI router coverage. So I'm setting a default /artists. So if someone tries to put in a janky URL that doesn't exist, it will default to kind of my index for artists. And then the one state that we have, I'll let you guys build some of the rest of the states, like the new artist form partial state, for example. I just have one state right now that's going to display all of the artists. Pretty simple. And then in this app, do you guys remember, what is this location provider HTML5 mode? What does that do? Why do we have that in here? Anyone at all?
I don't remember ever seeing that.
Does anyone else have any thoughts? We talked about it. It's kind of an optional thing. I think if I remember correctly from your project 3s, I think some of you guys didn't include that, and that's okay. But do you guys remember why we may want to include this code, location provider code?
If I remember correctly, doesn't it help with like parsing the URL and how it renders stuff in Angular, like your links?
Yeah, so that's the correct ballpark. So remember, with a single page application, we're not refreshing the page each time we go to a new state. And browsers can sometimes have difficulty remembering the history for where you've been and such. And too long didn't read. If you guys remember, Angular puts that little hash in the URL. So it's like localhost 4000 /# the really important stuff. So what that location provider does is it essentially removes that hash from your URLs so that your URLs look more, kind of standard the way that we're used to them. Your Angular app will work just fine without that code, with the hash symbol. That's totally fine. But if you want to remove that, that's what that line of code does. So it has to do with that HTML5 mode and how your browser remembers the history. Again, because with single page apps, we don't refresh. That's the idea. To the extent that we can, we try to avoid refreshing the page. And so it affects the history of where we've been in the browser. So that's what that's doing. Any questions about all of the code we just copied and pasted into our app? Okay, so I'm going to fire up my server. So again, the really important part, everything you see on the screen is completely separate from my Rails API application. So in a different window, I still have my Rails API running in the Rails server. It's running on localhost 3000. And just to sanity check that, I could go up here and go to localhost 3000 /artists, of course. And here are all my artists right here. This is a completely separate app, a completely separate server. You could just pretend that this is like the Open Movie Database API or the Open Weather API. Like, just pretend this is some separate third-party thing that exists. But I'm going to start my NodeMon server for this app, my front end. And this is going to be on local port 4000. So up here, let me go to localhost 4000. And let's see what's going on in the console. So I'm having an injector error, so we'll go back and check that. But essentially, this is the Angular, Node Express Angular app. So it's in a completely separate world than my backend right here. But let's troubleshoot this. So let's see if we have some information. So something with injector. So I probably misspelled something somewhere. So we'll take a quick peek at that. If anyone else is following along, did anyone else get a similar error? Just curious. You did?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, usually an injector error, a lot of times it's just something really simple, like a misspelling or something. So we'll just confirm. So the index is loading okay because we've got the janky looking nav. So let me check my spellings here. Muse app, Muse controller. Okay. I really enjoy the vague error messages. Let me do this. I don't think this is going to help us much, but if you recall, sometimes before you get to production, it's nice. Sometimes the error messages are better if you don't use the minified version of the code. So in development, it's fine because speed is not, that, I mean, it's important, but not that important as when we get to production. So I'm just going to take a stab at this. I'm going to change my Angular, instead of Angular .min.js, I'm going to grab the unminified version. And I'm just going to see if that gives me a little bit more data, because sometimes the error messages can be a little better. It may not work, but let's just see if that's helpful at all. Failed to instantiate. Okay, is this a little better? Still a lot of barfing at us, but instantiate module Muse app due to failed to instantiate module UI router. Module UI router is not available, misspelled module name. Okay, so let me make sure I got my spellings right. Oh, I think it's UI.router. Oopsie. That's what happens when I don't copy code. Okay, so let's refresh that and we're fine. So if you're playing along at home, it's UI.router, not UI-router. And that's what was in the screenshot, but I typed that out manually. So cool. So let me shrink this up a little bit. This is our Node Express Angular front end. It's completely independent of the back end. And again, let me just to demonstrate, well, we haven't created delete or show routes yet, so I can't do that. I was going to delete an artist and then we could see it, but yeah, so this is kind of the minimum barrier of entry to get Angular working, and Angular is communicating with our Rails API backend. And just for grins, well, you know what? I'll let you guys have some more lab time. Any questions about that, or does anyone need help? Is anything breaking
Is there
for
anybody
anybody?
that could Slack me the index.html?
Can you go to the README that I sent and check it out?
I'm on it, but I can't find it.
If you scroll down to the very, very bottom of that README, you should see a little drop-down section that says Angular app. And if you click that, all of those instructions are right there below it. I tried to be a little sneaky and not explicitly give that to you guys, but those are the steps to, yeah. So try that. I'm happy to Slack it out if you want, but it's all there for you. Okay, so that should get you guys up and bootstrapped at least. Any questions about anything, or does anyone need help having any errors or debugging, anything like that? Yeah, Kat Martinez, yes.
I'm having kind of some interesting behavior. So if I refresh the page on localhost 4000, it gives me an error that it cannot get. But if I remove /artist and then refresh and then hit enter, everything renders.
Yeah, I have that same thing too. We can fix that later on. I wouldn't worry about that right now. It's just how that controller is instantiated initially. If you recall, when Colin taught UI router, we had kind of a home controller on our body, and then we had another controller inside the body. I chose not to do that for this demonstration in the interest of trying to make this in as few steps as possible. Yeah, so right now, just if you refresh, you'll need to like kind of manually go into the URL and go to like localhost 4000, and that will totally reinstantiate that controller. It'll go back out to the Rails API and get that fresh data. So we can fix that later on. It's just kind of a minor thing that really I just didn't have time to worry about that right now. So
cool, thank you.
But it's not a bug. That should be the issue with everyone. And let me share my screen really quickly and show you what Kat is referring to. So yeah, right now, so the app should be rendering fine, but if you hit refresh, you guys should all be getting this error. And it's just with how the controllers, remember every time we refresh, the controllers like totally are reinstantiated. So just FYI, as you're playing around with this, you just need to go to localhost 4000, and then that controller will just kind of spin back up from scratch. I just didn't, again, I had more pressing things, so I haven't gone back and fixed that bug yet. But if you guys want to tackle it, that's cool. But it shouldn't keep you from moving forward. Let me stop my screen share. And cool, so that is the first method that we created today, index. So I'll put you guys back into breakouts, and if you guys want to work till maybe 5-ish or so, I would suggest working on the show and then the create, which would involve making a form. So you have to create a new artist partial to create that form to be able to create a new artist. So I would work on artist show. I'll put this into Slack. And artist create methods. Yeah, and just to recap, you shouldn't have to touch the Rails API at all. At this point, we're only creating the front end that can communicate with that Rails API that you guys created earlier. Any other questions? I need to ping Cody because he's host and let him open up the rooms again. Yo, Cody.
He also needs to create a nickname for you and Colin.
Create a what now? A nickname?
Nickname.
I know. What would be a good nickname other than Schmitty? That's my go-to. Or Cram, if you do dot reverse on my name. Mark Wrong? Is that too obvious? So we'll see you guys about 5 o'clock.
Yeah, give me a second to make the rooms, guys.
No problem.
Hold on, Christine's still in the room.
I'll also push up what I just created for reference if you guys need it. I'll push it up to the repo for now.